All right, welcome to another episode of the Aspiring VC. I'm here with Konstantin Dubovitskiy. But before we get into anything too serious, all listeners would like to know Dunkin' or Starbucks and why.
Dunkin' or Starbucks and why? That's that's actually an easy question. Neither. I absolutely hate spending my money like this. When I see the prices for Starbucks coffee, it's like $5. I'm like, I'll just make it myself, And if I have to meet someone for coffee, then yeah, definitely Starbucks because it's just made for coffee. That's it. Dunkin' Donuts, not my thing.
Well, you failed my first test because I'm a big Dunkin' Donuts fan, but that's all right. That's all right. We'll see if we can recover. But well, let's do like a 2-minute summary of just yourself and the firm and your role.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the firm. It's called Make Studios, venture studio, but it doesn't operate as much of a venture studio. So we don't actually incubate companies. We invest in outside founders. But other than that, we operate pretty much as venture studio. So let's say you're a founder with a great sales and marketing skills, but you need to finish your tech. So what we're going to do, we're going to give you one full-time UI UX developer and one full-time backend developer. They're going to work with you as part of your full-time team for like 2 months while you're taking care of sales, business development, all this stuff. They're going to finish all the tech, and bam, by the end of the 2 months period, you're going to have your MVP and some sales, some customer traction, et cetera. And their salaries are basically converted into equity, and that's how we invest. Originally, Make Studios is actually from Belgium. It's 6 years old, but they moved to the United States about 1.5 years ago. So that's about the time when I joined them. And yeah, I mean, they decided to expand because they realized that the population of Belgium is slightly less than population of Los Angeles alone. So they're like, all right, yeah, we'll move out. We'll see, what can be done in this bigger ocean, And yeah, that's when I joined them, when they decided to expand to the United States. Yeah, we invest super early on, as all venture studios do. So pre-seed, basically, the only thing we require is founder product fit. So you don't have to have a team. You don't have to have any customer traction. It's actually ideal for us if you don't have any customer traction, because then we can provide the most value. Our major value proposition is basically taking companies from zero and bringing them to somewhat sustainable revenue within 6 months. So yeah, when we talk to partners who send us deals, we always say, no revenue, ideally no investment. So we're like in 90% cases, we are the first money in. And yeah, we generally invest in SaaS B2B because those are the companies that have the clearest path to revenue. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it on the company side.
That's solid. And can you explain like how you guys kind of fit into the LA specific ecosystem in terms of other accelerators, venture studios, and some of the maybe downstream pre-seed or seed funds?
You mean how we compare to them, or how do we cooperate with them?
Yeah, like I don't know if there's certain ones you guys find that tend to invest after you, or groups that you have relationships existing with.
I mean, we have existing relationships with multiple different firms here. We're not LA specific as much. We're more of like Southern California. So like one of our general partners is based in San Diego. So I have multiple partners there. I also have a ton of friends in New York. But there is not like, one specific syndicate or individual angel investor or angel group or anyone like that who's just, picking up every single deal after us. We just reach out to our network once our portfolio companies are ready to raise a follow-up round. We just reach out to our network, see who's the best fit, talk to them, and yeah, generally one of them picks up and works with them. But yeah, there is no like individual group or firm that just works with every single deal that comes out of our venture studio.
Right. And thinking about your origin story, how did you end up in this role, and what are some of the pivotal life experiences that kind of brought you here?
Pivotal life experience, probably it would be the podcast creation. So I have a podcast for early stage startup founders called Fundraising Radio. We discuss pre-seed and seed stage investing there, mostly focused on first-time founders. And I've actually created because I was a startup founder myself. I failed multiple times actually, and I was like, okay, I'm just not good enough for this. I don't have enough experience, and I want to learn more about the investment side because I have a background in finance, investment banking to be more specific. And yeah, I was like, all right, I'm super young. I don't have my degree yet, so not a single firm is going to hire me if I'll just keep paying them on Indeed or LinkedIn. So how am I supposed to get into that field? Interview those people. So I created a podcast where I interviewed those investors, and after each episode, I was like, "Are you hiring? By the way, are you hiring? Maybe you're hiring." And eventually, yeah, one of them was Make Studios. I interviewed him. I actually knew the co-founder of the studio well before the interview itself. I interviewed him that he was like, "Oh, one of our portfolio companies might actually need your skills," and I worked with them for a bit. They loved my work. And then I started rolling from there. And yeah, that's how I ended up at Big Studios with the podcast plus working at their portfolio company.
It's a pretty ingenious method, and it does kind of dovetail perfectly into the next question, which is practical advice for some of the listeners that are early in college or young professionals kind of looking to break into these types of roles.
Best one I think I could give is podcast, honestly. Just interactions outside of work with people, probably. So if you reach out to investors, saying like, "Oh, I've heard your episode on, I know, like the full Ratchet or something like that, and I loved it. I started following your Twitter, love your thoughts, etc., etc." Just interact with them on Twitter, leave comments, reshare it. Sooner or later, they're actually going to remember your name. Eventually, once you do it for like a few months, reach out to them, especially if they have some positions open. You can reach out to them, say like, "Hey, I see you have this position open. I've been following you for quite some time. I love your strategies. I love how your thought process goes. Would you be open to talking to me about this position?" So that's the kind of hires that investors normally do. It's only through personal network. If you don't have personal network, that's exactly what you do. Of course, if you have some connections with investors already, just reach out to them. But I would highly recommend you not to try to go through the standard process, get your degree, get tons of internships, and then start applying to those positions on Indeed. I don't think that actually works.
Totally. And like when you look back, how many times has something like this happened where someone invites you onto their podcast, and how many other people have kind of brought you into their programming because you're a producer yourself of the content?
A few times. I've led a few investor exhibits, basically, where a ton of startups speak to a ton of investors. It was a little bit fun, but like not too fun for me. So I did those few times, but then I decided not to because it just got bored. Not too much value for me there personally. I wouldn't say I'm like super popular guest on other podcasts. Most likely is because we're not super famous yet. Or honestly, I'm not sure why exactly is that. I guess that I just don't have enough of personal brand to be invited to all those podcasts. Yeah, I think that's that.
200 episodes. Look, that's a lot though. It's impressive. I mean, what has been kind of the driving impetus? I guess we kind of understand the beginning impetus, but what's kind of kept you going? And I think a lot of people honestly don't hit, they really don't hit that volume. They probably stop before they reach that.
True. I mean, that's one of my major personal qualities. I'm very persistent at whatever I'm doing. I can do one thing over and over for ages, honestly. So that's the thing that helped me get through especially the initial stages, like before we hit 50 episodes. Honestly, it was a struggle to get enough speakers to participate on the podcast because like, who the hell are you? What are you doing? How many listeners do you have? Now people actually reach out to us asking to participate, and now we have a huge backlog of interviews that we've made, but we didn't release yet. So like, well, what 30 episodes recorded, and that's enough content for 3-4 months for us. So now the problem is reversed. But yeah, right now we're doing this mainly for connections, again, for brand. You cannot imagine how much my network is expanding every single week from that podcast. Honestly, like it's bringing so much good stuff into our work. Again, that's one of the major ways how I get introductions to the new people who we're working with. Like, if I introduce someone who's investing in seed stages, SaaS B2B, our portfolio company, SaaS B2B, is going to be raising money in a month. I interview this lady or guy today. And a month later, once our portfolio company is ready to raise, I'm like, hey, remember we spoke? Here's our company. Take a look at it. And yeah, it's just network generator basically. Super helpful in that terms.
And it seems like now it's at the point where it's almost it's not fully autonomous, but to some extent, the network growth is kind of happening naturally, and just by keeping it moving, you have these compounding positive effects.
100%. Yeah, very true. I mean, we also have some people working on the special outreach, so like they actually scout, the news articles. They are on Crunchbase, they're on Confluence VC. They're looking out for some cool announcements, like just this Friday I interviewed a guy who just closed around $100 million. And that's just from us reaching out to people who seem to be interesting, who are on the fly, I would say. So yeah, it's basically autonomous, but we do still have the outreach system where we reach out to special guests.
Right. And when you look out kind of a year or 2 years in the future, what do you kind of envision having reached, both with the podcast and maybe with the firm as well?
The podcast, I'll start with the podcast because I feel like it's easier. I'll still be running it. I'm pretty sure I'll still be running it because it's just fun. 2 years in, it's going to be hopefully on the level of the Full Ratchet. That's basically the podcast that I've been looking up to my entire life. Okay, not my entire life, but as soon as I joined the venture world, I was continuously listening to this podcast. A lot of some of my questions that I asked my speakers, I picked up from that podcast. Some of my speech style I picked up from Nick Moran. So it is my personal hero kind of. And yeah, in 2 years, I hope we're going to be on the level of recognition of the Full Ratchet. When founders ask founders, what kind of podcast would you recommend me if I'm planning to raise? And they're going to say Fundraising Radio. So that's hopefully where we're going to be at in 2 years. And in terms of firm, we're closing our first fund right now in the United States. We recently closed a fund back in Belgium. Those are small, pretty much testing funds, but luckily we're operating so early on that even out of small funds, you can make like 10, 15 investments. So we're doing good there. And in 2 years, hopefully we're going to raise a bigger fund, and yeah, it can be more investments, more action, and more interaction with other startup founders, because right now I'm mostly talking with investors because I'm the head of investor relations. Barely interact with startups. I have a few of my favorite from our portfolio that I actually advise, that I talk to on continuous basis. And yeah, hopefully in 2 years I'm going to be spending more time with our portfolio companies.
It's awesome. I mean, everything does sound like it's all trending positively in the right direction, and I think there's a lot of good things going on there. It would be cool. I don't know how many of the listeners are familiar with kind of the ins and out of investor relations. So do you think you could kind of just explain what that's like, and then, specifically in your role, what you're kind of focused on?
Yeah, sure. A lot of people I've spoken to, who are not in the startup world, I want to tell them, oh yeah, I'm the head of investor relations at the fund. They're like, oh damn, that's so cool. You might have a perfect life. 90% of it is sending emails. So be aware of that. It's 90% of jobs of pretty much every single VC. You don't have to be in investor relations to send emails every single day for most of your day. But yeah, that's most of it. You just talk to people on the phone, discuss deals, see where the overlap is, make sure that you provide value. That's probably the key thing that you have to learn. Before you talk to anyone, you're like, okay, can I actually bring value to that person, or do I see myself bringing value to that person in 2 years? Because if there is no value provided, if you don't provide value, then you're just wasting their time. So yeah, I would highly recommend you figure out what your major value proposition is as an individual, and yeah, then just when they help you, make sure you help them back. That's the major thing I think that helped me in the investor relations. And yeah, like if that's the case, your network is just gonna start growing, automatically. Basically, you don't have to do anything. You're just gonna get introductions. You're gonna get, good recommendations. Based on that good recommendations, you're gonna get more introductions, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just negative feedback loop. Yeah, that's the term.
And how does having been a founder yourself impact your kind of views, like now being on the other side of the table?
It feels good to be on the other side of the table, to be honest, but at the same time, not good. So it's a two-sided coin, to be honest. But I mean, it just makes me understand founders better. I know what they're going through. I've been through the same exact struggle, figuring out where the customers are, making sure those sales go through, figuring out where exactly I'm going to raise my next money from. So it's easier for me to help those founders now, being, through this entire experience myself. So I would say every single investor, I believe, has to have some kind of operational experience as a startup founders themselves, or at least, working as an early employee at the startup. Because if they don't go through this stuff, it just feels, it feels easy. So like right now, when I look at some of our portfolio companies, I'm like, oh, then come on, they can do this. It's easy, right? And then I remember how I was doing it myself, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's not that easy now. So it's just easier to understand the founders if you have been a founder yourself. So I feel like,
And do you find, I know you're spending a lot of time, interacting with investors, but, when you are interacting with the founders too, do you think they kind of have this higher level of respect for you, like knowing that you've been in the trenches before?
I wouldn't say like there's higher respect for me because I failed my companies, right? So there's not much respect gained there. But it's more of like, we're just on the same page. They know I've been there. They know I've gone through the same things as they did. So it's like they understand that I understand them. So they feel that they can be more open with me. So they don't have to, try to sound cool, try to sound, that they're fit for our investments or anything like that. So it's just more of a conversational option there because of that experience that I had in the past.
And, before we go into the rapid fire questions, one of the other things I just want to ask is, how you view kind of value add, investors saying they have that versus how many do, and kind of, your experience also being in a more hands-on position or a firm that's much more hands-on than kind of, just a check and sitting back.
Yeah, honestly, it's a tough process in the fundraising process because every single investor is going to say they're hands-on. They're going to make introductions. They're going to, do things for you. Every single investor says that. I have not seen a single investor who is like, oh no, we're just going to put a check in and leave you alone. I mean, honestly, there are a bunch of qualification questions that you can look into to understand that investor is actually doing this. But the main thing that you have to do is, if the investor is serious about you, if you really want to have them on your cap table, reach out to their portfolio companies, go through their Crunchbase profiles, see what they've invested in previously, reach out to the founders, especially to the founders of the companies that failed, and ask them, how did this investor work with you while your company was failing? Did they actually try their best, to back you, to make new introductions, to help you with introduction to people who might buy your product? Or did they just, email you once every month saying like, oh, we're seeing you're not doing great, keep it up, I know, work your best. I know, like basically talk to the founders who have gone through some rashy stuff in the past with that investor to see who that investor really is. Yeah, definitely. Talking to an investor is one thing. Talking to a founder who worked with that investor is a completely different thing, which is much more helpful.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's one of those things that when I was really trying to break into the industry, I feel like I didn't understand these kind of nuanced situations as much as when you're actually in that seat and you have to, take a serious evaluation of someone that you're going to invest in or someone that's going to invest in you, and actually, getting a sense of a background check on this person. So, if you're ready, we can go into some of these rapid fire ones.
100%. Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. First one is, who's been one of your most important mentors? It could be another VC, a founder, researcher, and what's like a lesson that they taught you or a specific quote that you remember, if there's kind of one big thing that really sticks in your mind?
Probably my best mentor is Alexis Better, the co-founder of Make Studios. I met him while I was running one of my startups, and he was running this meetup group where I went because I was struggling with customer acquisitions. And he spoke to me actually before the meetup. He just saw that I signed up, and he actually called me. He asked me, a bunch of questions on my company. He asked me what we were doing. And I was like, oh, we're finishing this website. We're doing this, payment options. We're doing XYZ. They're like, am I allowed to curse in this podcast? No?
I think it's fine. I think some other people have to.
All right. He was just like, fuck it, completely ignore this bullshit. Just reach out to customers. If they do not pick up the phone, go there in person, just start making sales, talk to the customers. No matter what your tech is, it can be literally nothing. You can be doing everything by hand. it doesn't matter. Go to the customers, see if your product actually makes sense. So I started making sales. I started calling those. I was working with the restaurants, delivering spices from farmers directly to restaurants. And I said, this idea is great. They're gonna love it. Helping farmers, paying less. When I talked to, I remember like 20, 30 restaurants, I realized it's not really the case. They literally did not care about the farmers, and neither did they care much about the price that we were dropping for them, because most of their expenses actually came from renting the venue, paying for the staff, etc., but not from spices. So eventually, after running a bunch of those interviews, after talking to a ton of customers, after running a bunch of Google ad campaigns, Facebook ad campaigns, we realized that people just don't need it. So instead of wasting extra 3 months developing the tech, we just spent 2-3 months talking to the customers. And after evaluating all the numbers, after looking through all this feedback that we got there, like, okay, it's just not going to work, and it's fine, So I think that's the best advice that anyone ever gave to me, that I actually listened to. He was very persuasive in his speeches, and I actually started following this lean startup model, which everyone knows about, but very few actually. I mean, not very few, but not every single founder follows it. A lot of founders tend to go into building the tech, just sitting behind their computer, hiding from their customers because they don't want their dreams to be crushed. So yeah, I think that's the best advice that I've got from this guy. I mean, I picked up a lot of stuff from him because he took me in his firm really early on when I was like, 18-ish. So yeah, I learned most of the stuff that I know now. I learned from him eventually. Of course, now it's a little bit different, but initially when I was just starting out, he taught me a lot.
That's awesome. That's a really great story. And I imagine now you have this strong, pain of the go-to-market. And so I'm sure you've advised a lot of people that are kind of in that process. Next one is, what is one of your favorite VCs outside of your own firm? It could be either a person or just another, venture fund or firm that you really like.
I would say, all right, I'll give two different people here. One is a fund, which is Backstage Capital. I love them because they're just doing so much innovative stuff. Not only they're focused on underrepresented founders, which I respect heavily. They're also based in Los Angeles, so that's another plus. And I mean, they're the first fund that crowdfunded their raise. So they recently went on Republic and closed. I'm not sure how much they closed, but I think in just a matter of 12 hours, I think they raised $1.something million there. And it's literally the first VC in the entire world that did this crowdfunding for the fund. So it's just, they're innovative. They invest in innovative people. They invest in people who were previously, ignored by the VCs. And they were actually one of the first people to start doing this. Now it's a hype. Now everyone is saying like, oh yeah, we love investing in underrepresented founders. Backstage Capital was the firm that started, that were one of the pioneers in this field. So I absolutely love what they're doing and how they approach this. And the second one is an individual, Jack Greco. He is a super angel based in Baltimore, I think, somewhere in New England, basically. And he's heavily focused on his, local market of startup, local ecosystem that is based in New England. So he invests in that field, he invests in that specific geography. And the major thing that he does is that he runs a pretty successful newsletters, where every single week he brings in a new person to help the network. So it's called the Mentor of the Week, I think. And how it works is that someone who Jack knows is able to take 5-10 hours per month of their time to actually help startup founders, just to help. And he puts them in front of the startups as actually is helping them. So yeah, I've been there as a mentor, and it is pretty fun. And I've seen how much time he as an individual puts into just helping founders, just for the sake of helping, not getting anything in return. Absolutely love seeing these kind of investors.
That's amazing. Yeah, we'll just say real quick for the listeners, the big way that you kind of get ahead in this world is by helping others. And so putting out goodwill, whether it's intros to investors, you do investor intros to founders, whatever it be, that's kind of how you get ahead here. Third one that I wanted to touch on is, what are either a couple startups that you really love right now, or just generally characteristics that get you really excited about a startup?
One of them is actually Boat.ai. right here. First of all, they do have a lot of merch, the t-shirts. I love those. But mainly we love them because they have the absolutely perfect product founder fit. The founder was running a company in this field for 5 years. He has like 3,000 customers. And then he realized that his current business is not scalable. It's just more like brick and mortar business. And he decided to go not global but nationwide. And he created Bo.ai. He has insane knowledge of the field. He has all the network that he needs to have to start this process off. And they're just doing absolutely great right now. So if you feel like you've been working in the field for a certain time, you should look into the problems of this field. If you solve them, investors are going to love this. If they see that you have relevant experience, which means that working in the field, the problem for which you're trying to solve, if you've been working in that field for enough time, they're going to pick it up as he or she might have a ton of connections there. They really know what they're doing. So yes, if you have this, if you feel like you have a product founder fit, definitely reach out to us. Even if you're in idea stage, if you just need someone to brainstorm it with, reach out to Mix Studios. We'll always love to start this relationship early on and talk to the founder for two months before we'll make an investment. So, yeah,
definitely. And what are some of the obviously you're going to want to promote your own podcast again, but what are some of your favorite podcasts, books and blogs in the kind of venture space?
Favorite podcast, honestly, I would say is The Full Ratchet. Again, I already mentioned them, but it's just the style of Nick Moran, like how he interviews people is great. He has really interesting questions. I've listened to a ton of podcasts. I hated most of them because most of the time they discuss some random stuff, like the podcast claims to be about early stage investments in the consumer tech, right? And they discuss some random crap, absolute random shit. And I just don't understand it. And the Full Ratchet, they stick to their value proposition. They discuss stuff that they promise to discuss. And yeah, of course, Fundraising Radio, our major, our slogan is No Bullshit Podcast, because we are only talking about fundraising for early stage startups, no random questions. So we're very much sticking to this approach. And in terms of books, I think I can say anything too helpful here. I would say read the Lean Startup. That's the golden standard book. I think that's the book that should kick off anyone's journey in the startup world. And Why Nations Fail. That's another good book that I found personally really interesting. So if you want to understand the overall economics of how general industry work, that's just something super interesting to read, plus a lot of history. So if there are any history geeks out there listening to this, check out Why Nations Fail. Super interesting, super helpful. Actually, some of this stuff is applicable to this world, so real fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. You've got some really great suggestions. Fun outro one here I want to hit on. Took this from Tim Ferriss, but really love it. Is what's a purchase of like $100 or a couple hundred that has had like an outsized impact of joy in your life?
Oh, joy. Oh man. I don't know, man. That's a hard question, actually.
I've had a lot of people say AirPods, for example, because they just couldn't get back to the wired.
No, I would not buy AirPods. I have the standard headphones. I generally don't listen to much music on my phone because most of the time I'm on my computer. So Bose is the ones that I'm sticking with. I would say the best purchase that I've had is Podpage, actually. So this is a tool for podcasters. It makes a website for your podcast pretty much automatic. We have a pretty neat website with me being absolutely zero in design. So they do pretty much every single thing for me. All the episodes are synchronized. Honestly, took off so much pain from my chest. And most of our new listeners who are coming in organically, they discover us through that website. So if anyone here is running a podcast, if you are thinking, should I actually get a website, do not go through WordPress. Do not go through, freelancers. That's bullshit. Don't. Check out Podpage. I think they have a decent competitor as well. I just forgot their name, so I'm not purposely advertising Podpage. But I just, they cost $15 per month. And I really don't even think about the website. It's just they're on the background doing itself. Super easy, pretty cheap. Brings me a lot of joy by not causing me any pain in the butt.
Yeah, it sounds like you wish you had it from day one. So I guess
Yep.
a long journey. So just last, promote yourself. Where can people find you? Twitter, LinkedIn, other social media.
Promote myself. My name is not rare, but Konstantin Dubovitskiy. I mean, there are not that many in the United States. So if you just Google my name, it's going to give you quite a few results there. I'm on Twitter, of course, and you can just search Fundraising Radio if you Google it. Not flexing our SEO here, but it's really good. So the first 10 pages is going to be purely Fundraising Radio. A lot of good content there if you're a first-time founder, if you're trying to figure out how to raise your first check, if you're trying to figure out how to talk to investors, what kind of questions to ask them, and how do they think, how do they make their decisions, what are they looking at. That's definitely a podcast for you. And yeah, that's the end of the self-promotion here.
Looking to innovate, invent, and disrupt? We're your partner to fuel your growth. Contact us to learn more.